Okay, sewing spandex. So, first thing you want to remember is low tension, low needle. And when I say that, needles normally are about 11, 14, 16, and the higher the needle, the more thick the fabric it's meant to go through. Spandex normally is a thinner material than, say, a duck canvas. So you want to make sure your needles, 11 is what I normally use. They also make spandex needles that are ballpoint. I've never really felt a need to buy special needles. Just follow some of these tricks and you should be fine with just a normal 11 store-bought needle. Next thing is tension. Tension is how tight your threads will be pulled together by the machine when it grabs the bobbin thread. You want low tension. How low? First and foremost, whatever you cut off, test this on that scrap piece. Even if you're starting a new project, test it on a piece of scrap that you don't need and get a feel for the material first and foremost. Don't just throw it in a machine because spandex have different pulls to them. The one I'm going to show you today, I think actually probably has more spandex than what I was asked. So it's probably got more stretch, probably a little thinner, but it's what I had on hand. So I'm going to do this at a 2. I already played around a little bit. I could possibly go a little higher, but 2 seemed to hold while still not bunching in the machine. So the next thing is, this is a walking foot. A lot of people have problems with the fact that the teeth at the bottom plate will pull faster than the normal foot will allow. A walking foot has teeth, I don't know if you can see these because mine's plastic, there you go, that help guide the fabric through evenly. I don't ever really use this. There's a couple tricks that you can do otherwise that seem to go a little faster if you've never used one and you don't want to have to learn and set it up, so on and so forth. But if you do have this and you are aware of how to use it, set it up on your machine, great. And if you're having problems with it feeding through your machine, this I would suggest. Next suggestion. If you do have a problem with your spandex wanting to not move through the machine evenly, here's a small little trick. Get some painter's tape, because you don't want it to like leave residue or anything else. You're going to cut a small little notch out. I'm going to see if I can get this to show you. It's a little uneven, but you get the idea. To cover up these front feet, but you still need that hole open. Now you don't want to cover up the feet entirely or your fabric will never go through your machine. You'll be pulling it to try and get it through and you don't want that either. This will help it just kind of guide through the front as well as the smooth surface of this, and it will guide it through evenly to the needle, and then the back will pull it out. That's a useful trick. And then of course when you're done, you just pull that right off, stick it in your machine for later, or do whatever. This is my suggestion if you don't have a walking foot, but you know, you're just bare minimum. So not all machines have this. You might have an older machine, but if you do have a store-bought kind of bottom of the line shelf, they normally have, you know, anywhere 15, 30 some stitches. A lot of them have this now. If your machine has SS on it, what that stands for is stretch stitch. Now, a stretch stitch is made primarily for knits and any type of fabric that has a stretch to it. One of the main ones I use for this is, as you can see here, most people call this a triple stitch. Now, I'll show you in a minute the difference, but when you're sewing a normal stitch, it's pulling the thread through, not a problem, but your fabric needs somewhat of a stretch. The triple stitch will allow you that stretch, and I'll show you here momentarily. The second thing I want to show you is if you don't necessarily have the SS on your machine, and if you do have the SS on your machine, make sure that if it's some kind of setting that you need to like set your dial to so it reads it, whatever you have to, but that's the stretch stitch. The next one, which is considered a stretch stitch on my machine, could be different for you. As you can see, all these they're considering stretch stitches, is this one right here. And mine will do it either way depending on how you sew in the machine. But those little arrows and dots are called an overlock stitch. And an overlock stitch will also give you a really decent stretch when you're sewing without having to worry about like pulling on the fabric or anything through your machine, because you don't want to do that. Alright, so let's go and try to show you the difference. Okay, so I have just done 3 different stitches to show you. Alright, so the first one, this is a normal straight stitch, about on a 3 for length, which it actually looks a lot tighter than it normally would because of the stretch. And I'm going to try and stretch this for you and see if you can see it. So, I don't know if you could hear that or not, probably not, but it is pulling like nobody's business. I could stretch it, but it's going to eventually potentially rip. We don't want that. So this is a triple stitch on the stretch stitch setting. Let me show you. That's what it looks like, you know, on one side versus the other. And of course, I'm doing this on a rolled hem. Again, I'm not sure exactly how you're going to want to use this on your project, but as you can see, I'm going to try and be really quiet. My focus is not going to play nice. I can stretch this. There is no feeling of it's going to break. It returns back to its original versus like your straight stitch. If you see, it started to kind of pull and wonky all of the back bobbin stitch part. So this one is my absolute favorite when it comes to stretch and knits. This is your overlock stitch, and I can stretch, watch, I can stretch this as far as I want, and it returns right back to its shape. There's no problem with that at all. So these two, the triple stitch and the overlock stitch, are what I suggest. Now, for some reason, absolutely none of that is working for you. Let me switch this over. Your last resort for hemming this with a straight stitch without, and again, I do not suggest this, but if there is no other options, when you put it in, let me make sure I'm back on. All right, we are going to okay, so what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start this a little bit far forward. Some people say that there's a method of stretching both sides of the fabric. That way, when it is unstretched, the fibers will get tighter, or not fibers, the stitch will get tighter, and that way, if it gets stretched out, it'll return to its original. I don't really like this. It's not really great for your machine or needle to be pulling fabric through. Also, depending on how tight you pull, when they go into a scrunched position on the normal sitting of the fabric, you can get these little puckers. But if you practice enough on your scrap or whatever and you feel comfortable, you can hold both sides. Why are we still like doing that stitch? 1 second. That is not the stitch I asked for. There we go. That's why it looks so funny. Okay. All right, so we're going to kind of pull, and not like, oh my gosh, tight, but we're gonna keep some tension on it and pull it through. Now if you do that, as you can see, hopefully, it kind of makes your stitches go diagonal almost, because this is what they should look like in normal. This is what they've now scrunched up to be. It's doable, but it is not ideal. I can pull this now, and when you return it to the pulled position, that's where your stitches were naturally put in. So you don't have fear of it, as much fear of it ripping or anything when it's stretched. But like I said, it's not the prettiest to look at versus, say, a triple stitch, which pretty much looks the exact same no matter what you do. Or even the overlock stitch. The overlock stitch, it'll spread out. Sorry. But it essentially looks the same or not bad when it's stretched or returned back. So I hope this helps. Needle low, tension low. There are plates and feet that you could do if this is going to be a everyday thing for you and you want to invest in that. But if this is just a one-off project, then those are my suggestions and tips to help you get through it.